Academy schools are state-funded schools in England which are directly funded by the Department for Education and independent of local authority control. The terms of the arrangements are set out in individual Academy funding agreements. Most academies are secondary schools. However, some primary schools, as well as some of the remaining first, middle and high schools, are also academies. Academies are self-governing non-profit charitable trusts and may receive additional support from personal or corporate sponsors, either financially or in kind. They do not have to follow the national curriculum, but have to ensure that the curriculum is broad and balanced, and that it includes the core subjects of mathematics and English. They are subject to inspection by Ofsted. Types of academy. The following are all types of academy. Sponsored academy. A formally maintained school that has been transformed to academy status as part of a government intervention strategy. They are consequently run by a government-approved sponsor. They are sometimes referred to as traditional academies. Converter academy. A formally maintained school that has voluntarily converted to academy status. It is not necessarily for a converter academy to have a sponsor. Free school. Free schools in new academies established since 2011 via the Free School Program. From May 2015, usage of the term was also extended to new academies set up via a local authority competition. The majority of free schools are similar in size and shape to other types of academy. However, the following are distinctive subtypes of free school. Studio school. A small free school, usually with around 300 pupils, using project-based learning. University technical college. A free school for the 14 to 18 age group, specializing in practical, employment-focused subjects, sponsored by a university, employer or further education college. An academy trust that operates more than one academy is known as an academy chain, although sometimes the terms academy group or academy federation are used instead. An academy chain is a group of schools working together under a shared academy structure that is either an umbrella trust or a multi-academy trust. An academy with an official faith designation is sometimes referred to as a faith academy. Features of an academy. All academies are expected to follow a broad and balanced curriculum, but many have a particular focus on or formal specialism in one or more areas, such as science, arts, business and enterprise, computing, engineering, mathematics, modern foreign languages, performing arts, sport, or technology. Although academies are required to follow the national curriculum in the core subjects of maths, English and science, they are otherwise free to innovate, although they still participate in the same Key Stage 3 and GCSE exams as other English schools. Like other state-funded schools, academies are required to adhere to the National Admissions Code. In terms of their governance, academies are established as companies limited by guarantee with a board of directors that acts as a trust. The Academy Trust has exempt charity status regulated by the Department for Education. The trustees are legally, but not financially, accountable for the operation of the academy. The trust serves as the legal entity of which the school is part. The trustees oversee the running of the school, sometimes delegating responsibility to a local governing body which they appoint. The day-to-day management of the school is, as in most schools, conducted by the head teacher and the senior management team. In sponsored academies, the sponsor is able to influence the process of establishing the school, including its curriculum, ethos, specialism and building. The sponsor also has the power to appoint governors to the academy's governing body. History. The Labour government under Tony Blair established academies through the Learning and Skills Act 2000, which amended the section of the Education Act 1996 relating to city technology colleges. They were first announced in a speech by David Blunkett, then Secretary of State for Education and Skills, in 2000. He said that their aim was to improve pupil performance and break the cycle of low expectations. The chief architect of the policy was Andrew Adonis in his capacity as education advisor to the Prime Minister in the late 1990s. Academies were known as city academies for the first few years, but the term was changed to academies by an amendment in the Education Act 2002. The term sponsored academies was applied retrospectively to this type of academy, to distinguish it from other types of academy that were enabled later. Sponsored academies originally needed a private sponsor who could be an individual or an organization. These sponsors were expected to bring the best of private sector best practice and innovative management to academies, often in marked contrast to the lack of leadership experience by the failing schools that academies have replaced. They were originally required to contribute 10% of the academy's capital costs. The remainder of the capital and running costs were met by the state in the usual way for UK state schools through grants funded by the local authority. The government later removed the requirement for financial investment by a private sponsor in a move to encourage successful existing schools and charities to become sponsors. Sponsored academies typically replaced one or more existing schools, but some were newly established. They were intended to address the problem of entrenched failure within English schools with low academic achievement, or schools situated in communities with low academic aspirations. Often these schools had been placed in special measures after an Ofsted inspection. They were expected to be creative and innovative because of the financial and academic freedoms. In order to deal with the long-term issues they were intended to solve, originally all sponsored academies had to have a curriculum specialism within the English Specialist Schools program. However, this requirement was removed in 2010. By May 2010 there were 203 sponsored academies in England. The Academies Act 2010 sought to increase the number of academies. It enabled all maintained schools to convert to academy status, known as converter academies, and enabled new academies to be created via the Free School program. At the same time, the new Conservative-led coalition government announced that they would redirect funding for schools' specialisms into mainstream funding. This meant that secondary schools would no longer directly receive ring-fenced funds of £130,000 from government for each of the specialisms. One way to regain some direct control over the finances was to become a converter academy and receive all of the funding direct from government, with the possibility of buying in services at a cheaper rate. This, along with some schools wanting more independence from a local authority control, meant that many state secondary schools in England converted to academy status in subsequent years. By April 2011, the number of academies had increased to 629, and by August 2011, reached 1070. By July 2012 this number reached 1957, double that of the previous year, and at the 1st of November 2013, it stood at 3,444. In March 2016 it was announced that all of England's state schools would become academies by 2022. There are no academies in Wales, where education policy is devolved to the Welsh Assembly. To date, the Welsh Government has followed a policy of having no academy status schools in the country. The Education Funding Agency monitors financial management and governance of academies. In March 2016, 2016, the Perry Beaches The Academy Trust Multi-Academy Trust was found to have deleted financial records for £2.5 million of free school meal funding, and that the chief executive was being paid by subcontractors as well as by the trust. Its schools are likely to be taken over by a new trust. In August 2016, former principal and founder of King's Science Academy, former finance director, and former teacher who was the founder's sister were found guilty of defrauding public funds of £150,000. Support for the Academy's scheme. While still in the fairly early stage of development, supporters pointed to emerging data showing striking improvements in GCSE results for academies compared to the predecessors, with early results showing that GCSE results are improving twice as fast in academies as in state schools. In an article in The Observer that regarded many of the government's claims for academies with skepticism, journalist Geraldine Bedell conceded that they seem, so far, to be working not all as spectacularly as Osborne, but much better than most of the struggling inner-city schools they replaced. The article singles out the cited academy, Osborne Community Academy in Hackney, as apparently the most popular in Britain, at least with politicians, and the top school in the country for value-added results. Criticism of an opposition to the Academy's scheme. The introduction of academy schools was opposed, notably by teachers' trade unions and some high-profile members within the Labour Party, such as former party leader Lord Kinnock. Academies have continued to be controversial, and their existence has frequently been opposed and challenged by some politicians, commentators, teachers' unions, and parents. Even after several years of operation and with a number of academies open and reporting successes, the program continues to come under attack for creating schools that are said to be, among other things, a waste of money, selective, damaging to the schools and communities around them, forced on parents who do not want them, and a move towards privatization of education by the back door. The House of Commons Education and Skills Select Committee reported in March 2005 that it would have been wiser to limit the program to 30 or 50 academies in order to evaluate the results before expanding the program, and that the rapid expansion of the academy policy comes at the expense of rigorous evaluation. The Select Committee was concerned that the promising results achieved by some academies may be due to increased exclusions of harder-to-teach pupils. They noted that 2 Middlesbrough academies had expelled 61 pupils, compared to just 15 from all other secondary schools in the borough. The program of creating academies has also been heavily criticized by some for handing schools to private sector entrepreneurs who, in many cases, have no experience of the education sector. Most infamously, the evangelical Christian car dealer Sir Peter Vardy, who has been accused of promoting the teaching of creationism alongside macroevolution in his Emmanuel Schools Foundation academies. This is also linked to the wider debate in the education sector as to the benefits or otherwise of the growing role of religion in the school system, being promoted by the new Labour government in general, and Tony Blair in particular, with many academies being sponsored either by religious groups or organisations, individuals with a religious affiliation. Former leader of the Labour Party Neil Kinnock has criticised the Academy's scheme, saying that they were a distortion of choice and risked creating a seller's market, with schools selecting parents and children instead of parents selecting schools. There are indications that several city academies are failing. Ofsted has placed the Unity City Academy in Middlesbrough and the Richard Rose Central Academy in Carlisle under special measures measures, heavily criticised the West London Academy in Ealing and condemned standards at the Business Academy in Bexley, Kent. The Richard Rose Central Academy in Carlisle, sponsored by Eddie Stobart owner Andrew Tinkler, and local businessman Brian Scowcroft, opened in September 2008. By January 2009, there were protests by parents and pupils regarding poor quality education and school facilities. The school was found to be failing and was placed in special measures, with the headmaster and chief executive being immediately replaced. The original City Academy program was attacked for its expense. It cost on average £25 million to build an academy under this scheme, much of which was taken up by the costs of new buildings. Critics contend that this is significantly more than it costs to build a new local authority school. Some operators are paying senior staff six-figure salaries, partly funded by central government. In 2012, the Academy scheme was applied to primary schools. The government began transforming some schools that had been graded satisfactory or lower by Ofsted into academies, in some cases removing existing governing bodies and head teachers. An example was Downhills Primary School in Haringey, where the head resisted turning the school into an academy. Ofsted were called in to assess the school, and placed it in special measures. The head and the governing body were removed and replaced with a government-appointed board. There was opposition from the school and parents. A parliamentary report in 2015, entitled Free Schools and Academies, recommends that, in the meantime, the government should stop exaggerating the success of academies and be cautious about firm conclusions except where the evidence merits it. Academization is not always successful, nor is it the only proven alternative for a struggling school. In 2016, a major study by the Education Policy Institute found no significant differences in performance between academies and local council-run schools, and that multi-academy trusts running at least 5 schools performed worse than local council-run schools. Party policies and developments since the end of the Labour government. The Conservative Party has supported the Academy proposal from its inception but wants the scheme to go further. This accord was reflected in a remark made by Conservative spokesman David Willits in 2006. "I am more authentically Andrew Adonis than Andrew Adonis is." In 2004, the Liberal Democrats were reported as being split on the issue and so decided that academies should not be mentioned in the party's education policy. The position of Phil Willis, the education spokesman at the time, was summarized as, "There are no plans to abolish either city academies or specialist schools if the Lib Dems came to power, though they would be brought under local authority control." In 2005, Willis' successor, Ed Davey, argued that academies were creating a two-tier education system and called for the academy program to be halted until a proper analysis can be done. Academies are supported by all 3 main political parties, with a further cross-party initiative to extend the program into primary schools currently being considered. In 2010, the Conservatives and Liberal Democrats coalition government announced plans to expand the academy program with the Academies Act 2010. In May 2010, the then Education Secretary Michael Gove wrote to all state schools in England inviting them to opt out of local authority control and convert to academy status. Gove also stated that some academies could be created in time for the new academic year in September 2010. By the 23rd of July 2010, 153 schools in England had applied for academy status, lower than the prediction that more than 1,000 would do so. In spite of the expanding academy program, in August 2010 Gove announced that 75 existing academy rebuild projects were likely to be scaled back. Nevertheless, by September 2012, the majority of state secondary schools in England had become academies. Monthly updated information on existing academies and free schools, and applications in process, is published by the Department for Education. Comparisons. The City Academy program was originally based on the program of city technology colleges created by the Conservative government under Margaret Thatcher in the 1980s, which were also business-sponsored. Currently, the government is encouraging CTCs to convert to academies. Several have already done so. Academies differ from CTCs in several ways. Most notably, academies cannot select more than 10% of pupils by ability, whereas CTCs can. Academies have been compared to U.S. charter schools, which are publicly funded schools largely independent of state and federal control. Operators of academies. A number of private and charitable organizations run groups of academies. These major operators include ARC Schools, Academies Enterprise Trust, EACT, Emmanuel Schools Foundation, Harris Federation, Oasis Trust, Ormiston Academies Trust, LSSAT Academies Trust and United Learning Trust. The Department for Education publishes a full list of active academy sponsors.